Coming up in our newscast tonight. With Kim Jong-un visiting China for the third time this year alone, North Korea watchers are highlighting possible reasons for the trip, such as striving to learn from Beijing on opening up and reforming its economy, seeking international sanction relief, or solidifying its alliance with the Asian giant. During her press conference, South Korea's foreign minister highlights certain topics linked to inter-Korean ties. Among them are economic cooperation and China's role in helping to establish peace and security on the peninsula. South Korea's ruling party, the government, and other officials meet to discuss ways to respond to the people's overwhelming support. They vow to focus all efforts in improving the lives of citizens, starting with effective measures to fully implement reduced working hours. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. We start things off with Kim Jong-un's visit to China, the third one in less than 3 months. The leader is expected to have left Beijing Wednesday afternoon, according to the Associated Press. Clearly, the two longtime allies are proving to the world their friendship is still ironclad, but the meeting is sure to have centered around more than just reaffirming ties. Lee Ji-won has our top story.
Just a week after his historic summit with the U.S. president, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has once again visited the North's close ally China for 2 days, starting Tuesday. Kim and Chinese President Xi Jinping's previous two summits came just a few days before Kim's meetings with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And with more negotiations for follow-up measures to the North Korea-U.S. summit to take place soon, experts say Kim could be preparing for them with his Chinese counterpart. Others pointed at the delegates that accompanied Kim to China, including Cabinet Premier Park Bong-ju and Park Tae-sung, the party's vice chairman for science and education.
By having these officials see China and learn from it, Kim could be hoping to emulate Beijing's reforms and open up his own country's economy. He could also be seeking to launch joint projects with China.
In fact, according to South Korea's Yonhap news agency, the North Korean leader on Wednesday is expected to have visited Beijing's Academy of Agricultural Sciences. But the expert says the main reason for Kim's visit to China is to seek a reduction of Beijing's economic sanctions towards Pyongyang. Kim himself said at the ruling party's policy gathering in April that North Korea will now shift its focus from developing nuclear weapons to developing its economy.
There will need to be more time and concrete steps from the North before the U.S. can reduce its pressure. But Kim needs to make his people feel some amount of economic revitalization before the regime's major political events in months to come, so it's likely that Kim asked President Xi to show some flexibility in implementing sanctions on the regime.
But it is unclear whether the sanctions on the North will be eased. Secretary Pompeo reportedly told South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa in their phone call on Monday that China had agreed to fully implementing the Security Council's sanctions on North Korea. The U.S. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert also said at a briefing on Tuesday that the U.S. looks forward to China continuing its support for the world's maximum pressure policy. To this, the expert says, while sanctions will officially be implemented, both the U.S. and China could, to some extent, turn a blind eye to this, as the U.S. does not have a good enough reward for the North's denuclearization steps as of now, and tight monitoring could freeze the current momentum. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
China will play a constructive role in denuclearizing the regime. That's coming from Seoul's top office as it evaluates the third Pyongyang-Beijing summit. Hwang Ho-jun has the latest from Cheongwade.
In his regular press briefing Wednesday morning, the Blue House spokesperson said the latest North Korea-China summit is believed to have moved the denuclearization process a step further. He also said South Korea's top office hopes Beijing will continue to help North Korea achieve a stable and complete denuclearization. The words, quote, stable and complete, according to Kim Il-kyum, means China's presence would act as a safety valve in the many negotiations to come during the denuclearization process. Those comments from the Blue House were made after news broke that in their summit, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to cooperate on denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula and that China has promised to play a continued, constructive role in the future. This was Kim and Xi's third meeting in 3 months. It came just a week after Kim Jong-un had his historic first face-to-face meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump in Singapore on June 12th. The Blue House confirmed that President Moon had no direct communication or phone conversation with his Chinese counterpart, but emphasized that diplomats from Seoul and Beijing are in constant, active communication. Considering that Beijing was a combatant in the Korean War and a signatory to the Armistice Agreement, the Blue House is acknowledging China as a key stakeholder when it comes to peace between the two Koreas, and said it will continue to closely monitor any developments in Pyongyang-Beijing relations. Jun, Arirang News.
Seoul's foreign minister held a press conference with members of the foreign media today. While discussing the developments on the peninsula, she made some important points, mainly about the government's stance on sanctions targeting North Korea. Park Hee-jun has the highlights from that session.
South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa has reiterated that sanctions on North Korea will stay in place until it denuclearizes completely.
Meanwhile, the sanctions will remain in place until we are assured that complete denuclearization has been achieved.
Speaking Wednesday at a press conference for foreign correspondents in Seoul, Kang also said the South Korean government will establish economic relations with the North within the boundaries of international sanctions. She said the South plans to continue working with the UN Security Council and the United States on the details of inter-Korean economic cooperation, as it did for the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. And although it's currently difficult to take steps that are concrete, Seoul's Unification Ministry will continue to carry out research and other preparations for future economic ties with the North. Kang Kyung-hwa also told reporters that China is expected to play a crucial role in establishing peace and security on the Korean Peninsula. According to the foreign minister, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's latest visit to Beijing is expected to help realize the shared goal of denuclearization and lasting peace, and the South Korean government will be keeping close tabs on the details of their summit. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Officials from Seoul are visiting the joint factory park up north for the second day in a row to lay the groundwork for a liaison office between the two Koreas. Plus, a civic group is also crossing the border to discuss holding events together with Pyongyang. Oh Jung-hee gets us up to speed with the developments.
A South Korean team of 17 people visited the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex for the second day in a row on Wednesday. The team included officials from Seoul's Unification Ministry and civil staff from Hyundai Asan, which played a key role in establishing the industrial complex. The team continued their prep work on the facilities, including the draining of a flooded basement of the Inter-Korean Interaction and Cooperation Office. They also cleaned up, checked the electricity network, and set up pipes at another building where they plan to set up a temporary liaison office. The prep work was originally scheduled to take place for 2 days only, but the South Korean team decided to visit the site for 2 more days on Thursday and Friday, saying that additional work was found to be necessary around the facilities. The North Korean side agreed to the last-minute change of plans. The two Koreas decided at their high-level talks early this month to set up the joint liaison office within the Kaesong Industrial Complex, a factory park that was jointly run by the two Koreas. But the complex needs renovation because it's been shut down since February 2016. Meanwhile, 15 South Koreans are traveling to Pyongyang for a 4-day stay starting Wednesday. They're from a civic group that was formed in 2005 to implement the June 15th Joint Declaration, the first ever summit agreement between the two Koreas. They're to meet with authorities in Pyongyang to discuss inter-Korean joint events and ways to boost civil interactions.
At the high-level talks on June 1st, South and North Korea agreed to find ways to meaningfully celebrate the 18th anniversary of the June 15th Joint Declaration. So we are anticipating there could be progress on that front.
The leaders of South and North Korea agreed in late April to hold joint events on major occasions observed by both sides. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in believes a peace system on the peninsula will open doors to full-fledged economic cooperation between the two Koreas. And when that happens, it should proceed to include Russia for a three-way cooperation. That's one of the issues he plans to discuss with President Vladimir Putin in Moscow this week. Ahead of that visit, our Moon Gon-young provides a sneak peek of the liberal leader's interview with the Russian press.
South Korea and Russia share the common goal of a complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and a lasting peace settlement. That's South Korean President Moon Jae-in in an interview with the Russian media on the eve of his 4-day state visit to the world's largest country by area. And President Moon said he wished to discuss with his Russian counterpart the two countries' cooperation in various aspects, as he believes once a peace regime is established on the Korean Peninsula, it will open an era of full-fledged inter-Korean economic cooperation, and that framework should include Russia to create a Seoul, Pyongyang, Moscow three-way cooperation. The bilateral cooperation between South Korea and Russia can begin in areas such as railways, natural gas, and electricity, the president said, and the North can join later. The South Korean president added, once a lasting peace system is established between the two Koreas, in the long run, it should develop into a multilateral peace and security cooperation system that encompasses the entire Northeast Asia region. For that, Mr. Moon will continue to closely coordinate with Russian President Vladimir Putin. On the results of the North Korea-U.S. summit in Singapore earlier this month, the South Korean president said they have surpassed all expectations and called all the parties concerned now to implement the agreed measures as soon as possible. He stressed North Korea should take certain steps and the U.S. should provide comprehensive security guarantee. President Moon, during this first state visit by a South Korean head of state to Russia since 1999, is scheduled to sit down with his Russian counterpart on Friday for the third time since taking office in May 2017, and also become the country's first ever president to deliver a speech to the Russian State Duma. The South Korean leader's trip to Moscow comes amid a flurry of international efforts, including 2 inter-Korean summits and a never-before-seen U.S.-North Korea summit, to rid North Korea of its nuclear weapons program, as well as unprecedented diplomatic engagements by the North Korean leader with other heads of state. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News, The Blue House.
The Kremlin confirmed they had invited President Moon to an annual international forum expected to take place in the fall. According to Russian media Interfax, presidential aide Yuri Ushakov confirmed that Moon has been invited to the 4th Eastern Economic Forum in September. The event, scheduled to take place in Vladivostok, is expecting another special guest, that is Kim Jong-un. President Vladimir Putin requested the regime's leader visit Russia, suggesting to join the global event. The developments are drawing attention to another possible inter-Korean meeting and even a three-way summit with Russia. However, Ushakov mentioned nothing has been planned as of now. The nation's ruling party, government ministries, and officials from the presidential office met for the first time since the local elections, devising ways to improve people's lives and formulating follow-up measures to the recent inter-Korean summits were the key topics. Kim Min-ji shares with us what was discussed.
The landslide victory for the ruling Democratic Party of Korea is a show of the public's request that the party and the government work to improve their livelihoods. That was a consensus among senior ruling party lawmakers and top officials from government ministries and the presidential office, who said Wednesday that all efforts will now be directed at bettering people's lives.
The outcome of the local elections is a call for establishing lasting peace on the peninsula and taking care of the people's lives. We will thoroughly abide by those demands. We will work to show that the people made the right decision.
To get started, officials have decided to give a little bit of flexibility to the introduction of shorter working hours starting next month to minimize any fallout. Firms with 300 or more workers would have had to reduce their employees' maximum weekly working hours from the current 68 hours to 52 hours from July 1st, but will now have a grace period of 6 months. The change was made as part of the government's drive to improve work-life balance.
The amendment to the law came very quickly, and there hasn't been much time to prepare for the change. Although it's hard to adjust the starting time of the implementation, there is need to set a grace period for a soft landing.
The government also plans to announce a set of customized support and job creation measures for people depending on their income level. The Moon Jae-in administration has been pushing for so-called income-led growth, which consists of creating a virtuous cycle of increased household income and spending. As for the controversy surrounding a recent amendment to the Minimum Wage Act, the meeting's participants noted the importance of informing the public of any planned policies and their effects so that they can win their support and understanding. Some have argued that the revision, which calls for an inclusion of bonuses and other benefits of a certain size as part of the minimum wage, undermines the pay hike.
The Presidential Policy Office will work around 3 goals: being swift in implementing policies, making sure policies have the desired impact, and making sure people feel the effects of policies.
The officials also made clear the need to swiftly implement follow-up measures in light of the recent developments on the Korean Peninsula, such as carrying out economic cooperation, family reunions, and joint participation in sporting events. The ruling party also said that they will call on opposition parties for their cooperation to ratify the Inter-Korean Summit Declaration or at least adopt a resolution that supports it. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has maintained South Korea's growth outlook for this year at 3%. While the global body believes short-term economic prospects are fine, it did lay out necessary plans for long-term expansion. For details, let's turn to our Koryuni.
In its latest economic survey released Wednesday, the OECD has kept its growth outlook for South Korea at 3%, the same it's been since March. No change either in the forecast for next year, also at 3%. This is a biannual survey more comprehensive than the OECD's more frequent growth forecast. It focuses on a country and lays out its economic problems and possible solutions. The report says the South Korean economy rebounded in 2017 thanks to an uptick in world trade and surging demand for the nation's semiconductors. However, the country faces risks such as high levels of household debt. Household debt has risen to 180% of disposable income, which is far higher than the OECD average. The report also says South Korea is vulnerable to shocks because its growth is unbalanced, driven mainly by exports and manufacturing, which has led to economic and social polarization. It added that family-controlled business groups known as chaebols are causing a large number of problems. For one, they're hindering entrepreneurship. Some experts say reforming the chaebols is key to innovative growth. They also point out that South Korea lags behind in many areas, such as investment in R&D and deregulation.
For innovative growth, a country should focus on R&D investment. It should also encourage companies to invest in whatever they want and sell whatever they want. This means less regulation. However, South Korea is not seeing good results in these fields.
To tackle the rapid aging of the country's population, the OECD suggests a gradual increase in value-added tax rates to pay for greater social spending. The report also proposed a range of potential changes to boost Korea's quality of life. Those include measures to reduce poverty among the elderly, which it says could be achieved by increasing the basic pension and focusing it on the poorest senior citizens. Koryuni, Arirang News.
June 20th is a day for the global community to raise their voices in support of refugees. Korea is no exception, especially its southernmost resort island. Oh Soo-young zooms in on how Jeju is supporting asylum seekers who fled war-ravaged Yemen.
Hundreds of asylum seekers from the Gulf nation of Yemen may soon find places to work and live on South Korea's southern resort island of Jeju. The presidential office said in a briefing Wednesday that some 500 Yemeni asylum seekers will be granted the right to work in certain sectors, even if they haven't been granted official refugee status. Jeju's provisional authorities have already held job fairs and allowed 300 to look for work on the island.
Before decisions are made on their humanitarian rights to stay, we have granted them employment permits through the immigration law, which is separate from the Refugee Act.
Over the last 5 months, around 520 people from Yemen have applied to stay as refugees. That number alone is 12 times higher than the total number of Yemenis who applied for asylum in Korea last year. Most of the Yemeni asylum seekers are believed to have crossed over from Malaysia earlier this year, as Jeju Island offers up to 30 days visa-free travel for most foreigners. In 2013, South Korea became the first Asian country to enforce a standalone law on protecting refugees. Under the law, those who apply for refugee status can register for basic living expenses, up to $400 a month, before they're granted refugee status and the right to work. Addressing the fierce opposition from some locals and civic groups over accepting such an influx of Yemenis, the presidential office said Wednesday that it will tighten security to prevent possible crimes or clashes, while providing the asylum seekers with food, medical checkups and other means of assistance.
In case of economic difficulties, Jeju City is considering a certain amount of financial support for basic living expenses.
According to the UN Refugee Agency, more than 280,000 Yemenis had fled their country as of November last year, after a bloody civil war broke out in 2015. Seoul, Arirang News.
Throughout the 2018 World Cup, more than 1 million foreigners are expected to visit Russia. To help fans out and ensure a good time is had by all, the host nation is giving spectators of the games a special ID. According to our Won Jung-hwan, these passes come with a bunch of added bonuses and benefits.
The fan ID, also known as the second passport in Russia, is a document you are required to show along with your ticket when you attend the match at the World Cup. It's the first time such a service has been used at the World Cup, and Russia is proud to say the fan ID technology will become standard procedure for use in the future World Cups as well. According to the Russian Ministry of Communications and Mass Media, about 90% of ticket holders obtain fan IDs in advance in their home countries, while the rest pick them up at special tents located outside the stadiums. Indeed, at this center issuing fan IDs, people are lined up to get their second Russian passport. As for the benefits, the fan ID grants visa-free admission to the country for the duration of the World Cup.
I'm from China, and normally we need a visa to go to Russia. With a fan ID, we don't have to waste time on visa. We can use fan ID to get into Russia.
The fan ID also allows holders to use public transportation for free, such as buses and metros, in each of the host cities.
Well, the benefit is that we can ride for free during the match day, and if we have our tickets, we can ride 2 days before the match.
And free transportation isn't limited within the various cities either. More than 700 extra trains have been laid on during the World Cup to provide free travel for fans between host cities, as long as they have their fan IDs. If you have a ticket to the match in the city where the train is headed and your corresponding fan ID, you could take advantage of a free travel between all 11 cities hosting the World Cup. But while the benefits of having a fan ID are obvious, some fans complain about the trouble they had getting one.
Yeah, maybe I think it's good for the country that organized the World Cup for more security. But for us, it's like trouble to get it. You have to fill up forms, then go and pick it up, and I don't know if that's useful. Because if you have your ticket, it's the same. And you need a ticket to get the fan ID, so it's a problem to organize it.
Russia might not be known around the world for its technological prowess, but the fan ID system introduced here looks here to stay for World Cups to come. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News, Moscow.
Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the update you need. Michelle, I hear the weather is going to get hotter this week.
Daniel, another hot sunny is upon us tomorrow with similar readings to today. The nation will be under high levels of UV rays, especially between 2 and 5 p.m. The morning low in Seoul starts at 17 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Gyeongju wakes up to 19 and 18 degrees respectively, and Busan at 20 degrees. And under clearer skies, the afternoon highs will reach up to 28 in Seoul, 30 in Gwangju, and 31 for Daegu. Conditions will continue to sizzle until the monsoon rain falls next week. The rain will begin again over on Jeju and move upwards gradually. As for the weather conditions in Russia, national teams will face adverse weather throughout this week. But as for tonight's game over in Kaesong, weather won't be a problem. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
This is where we wrap up our Wednesday edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for watching. Good day or good night, depending on your time zone.